Welcome to video 18 for Control-Shift-Enter Mastering Excel Array Formulas. Hey, we're in the Workbook Array Formula DVD book. Start on the sheet Topics. Hey, last video we talked about the amazing frequency function. And in this video, we want to put it to good use creating unique count formulas. Now I'm going to click on the link 18 and jump to sheet 18. Now, counting unique items. There could be different data types, and we're going to start with counting unique numbers. Here we have a data set, and we have some invoices, and we want to count unique numbers in this column. And the frequency function is perfect for counting numbers. Now, I want to look down here. I put the same invoices that are up here down here, and remind ourselves how the frequency function works. Now, frequency function, you give it some data, some upper values called bins for each category, and it'll count. It'll tell you how many numbers are in each category. Not only that, but if we give it 6 upper values, frequency spits out 7 answers, 1 extra answer in case there's any really big values. Now, here's our trick. I'm going to highlight these 7 cells, because that's the way the frequency works. I'm going to type equals frequency. Remember, data and bins. Now, the key to unique count for numbers is to give the data array argument, comma, and the bins array argument the same numbers. Now, what is this going to do? Well, one thing we learned last video is if the bins have duplicates, and notice 101, 101, 106, 106, there's duplicates. Well, remember, the second dupe for the bins is totally ignored. That means this count right here will get a count of 2. Because there's only one 1037, that'll get a count of 1. 10112 will get a count of 1. That'll get a 0. Totally ignore it. That'll get a count of 2, and that'll get a 0. So, close parentheses. Let's highlight and look at it. Right in our cell here, we get 121020, and there's that extra 1, right? What's the pattern here to tell us, to allow us to count unique values? Any number greater than 0. Now I'm going to Control Z, and I'm going to enter this, Control-Shift-Enter. Notice there's the first 101. It's not only the data, but it's also the bin. That second one's totally ignored. That is absolutely amazing. And by the way, these numbers can be whatever you want. And it is only going to get a count in the very first instance of each number. Now I'm going to Control Z, Z, Z. Bunch of Control Z's there. Now, how are we going to use that? Let's use it in a formula up here. Frequency. I'm going to do that trick. Data, comma, and bins exactly the same. Now, our pattern, F9, any number greater than 0. So we can simply convert this to a logical formula, a logical array formula. There's our operation, greater than 0. I highlight. Trues. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 trues. Since I would like to use some product, and some product can't understand trues and falses, I'm going to use double negative to convert it to 1s and 0s. Now, that's a math operator. It'll calculate before that, and I want this to calculate first, so I add some parentheses to force that comparative operator. Now I have what I want, some numbers that the sum product can add. Now, this is an array calculation, and I want to avoid Control-Shift-Enter. Since I'm adding, I'm using sum product. That array right there, it's just going to add the result of that array. Now, that's pretty cool because the frequency spits out an array of values and requires Control-Shift-Enter. So do operations like this. But sum product, it can handle it. Absolutely amazing. Now, that is a great method. There is another way to do a unique count also. And it's actually a little bit easier to create, especially as we go through some of the tricks later in this video. However, it is really slow calculating. And we will see, we'll look at a timed example in just a moment. Let's look at the COUNTIF function. Now, COUNTIF. We know that the range argument cannot handle an array. However, the criteria argument can. Let's do that same trick. Let's highlight these numbers. OK, so those are all of the values that we want to potentially count. Criteria. If we highlight all the values, first off, we're doing a function argument array calculation. Not only that, but remember, if we give it 6 numbers into criteria, that means COUNTIF function will spit out 6 numbers. Well, what's going to be the count for 101? It's 2, right? It's going to have a 2 here and a 2 here. That's going to have a 1, of course. That's going to have 1. This is going to have a 2 and a 2. Now, unlike the frequency where we got a 2 and a 0, COUNTIF, when you give it more than one value here, it's flat out going to just give you a bunch of 2s. I'm going to hit F9. Look at that. Now, we can't add that because that would just massively overcount, right? But check this out. Since there's a 2 there and a 2 there, we can take this whole array, right, and do another array calculation. I'm going to say 1 divided by, which means this array of values right there is in the denominator. Well, what's 1 divided by 2? 0.5. When I hit the F9 key, that means there's going to be a 0.5 right there in the second position and in the fourth position. The 2 and the 2, meaning a count for invoice 1001, is now 0.5, 0.5. Control Z. Check this out. I'm just going to Control Shift Enter just for a second and change this to 1001. Now I better get a count of 333. And what's 1 divided by 3? It's a third. And when you add them all together, it's going to be 1. F9. So notice here we have a third and a third and a third. So we took the repeating 3, did 1 divided by 3. But now when we put this inside of sum product, it'll add it. And instead of getting 3 plus 3 plus 3, which is 9, it's going to get a third plus a third plus a third, which is 1. Absolutely amazing. Now I can put the result of that into sum product. Again, we're going to use that array because we can avoid Control Shift Enter and just hit Enter. Absolutely beautiful. Now I'm going to change this back to 1016. All right, so we have our frequency and our COUNTIF. COUNTIF is a little bit easier, and as we go forward, we'll see that it is much easier than some of the frequency formulas we're going to have to use for some of our unique count situations. But the bottom line is, let's go look at timing, time unique count. So you can open this workbook, and we're going to look on the sheet FR, CIF. So I'm going to Control O, and the timing workbooks are always going to be in the timing formulas folder. There it is, time unique count. And here it is. There's our frequency. And this only has 1,000 rows. That's not very much data. And the COUNTIF. And look at this. 0.004 seconds, 0.08 seconds. And I'm sorry, that is a lot longer. That's 18 times longer. And this data set is only 1,000 rows. Over here on this sheet, time unique, let's see. I only have 5,000. But it's looking like 194 times longer. So the problem with COUNTIF, and it's not just COUNTIF, SUMIF, AVERAGEIF, anytime you start doing array calculations in your criteria argument, things are going to slow down, or calculation is going to slow down. Now, I, of course, time this with my computer and my situation. You always got to be careful about timing because your exact situation is going to be different. There's a great website and some code you can download to time your own formulas from Excel MVP Charles Williams. Absolutely awesome. All right, now we're going to see a bunch of frequency and COUNTIF formulas in this video. But we're going to get the same results or even more dramatic. So this is the one time we're going to look at this timing. All right, now let's go down to our next example. Because sometimes we want to count unique numbers in a list of numbers given one condition. So here I have a condition. I want to count only unique invoices that occurred on the 16th. Now, let's look at our frequency here. That's our same formula. It's given us a 4. Well, what is it that we're counting here? The data. So if I look here, do I want all these numbers? No, I just want the ones on the 16th. So that would be these 3 right here. Well, a great way to isolate numbers when you have a condition is the if function. So check this out. I'm just going to limit this data. I don't want them all. I'm just going to say if anything in the date range, notice I'm in the logical test, anytime, and that's an array of values, is equal to the 11/16/2012. That's going to be our logical test. I highlighted two. Oh, I forgot to hit comma. When I click on this and evaluate it, that gives me trues and falses. That is a great way to isolate values. Only when it sees a true, Ctrl Z, will it take these values right there, value of true. Remember, I leave this off, and that's what the if function will put a false in. So now I can click that, F9, boom, I have isolated, and now I'm dumping only the invoices I want into the frequency for my data. Ctrl Z. Now, what's going to happen here? This is an if function. Anytime you have an array calculation in the if function, you have to do Control-Shift-Enter, even if some product or some other function is housing it that can handle array calculations without Control-Shift-Enter. So if I hit Enter, I get a value error. No problem. What can I do? Control-Shift and Enter. Now, that's not a good idea. And the reason why, as you can see up here in the formula bar, those curly brackets are there. But what's going to happen? Someone, or even yourself, or even me, I've done this. I'm editing my formula. I'm like, oh, yeah, some product. It doesn't require Control-Shift-Enter. But remember, if it's trumping the sum product here. So when that happens, you should just get rid of the sum product and use sum. That makes this unambiguous. If you're looking at this formula, you're saying, oh, yeah, array formula, I have to use Control-Shift-Enter. So I'm going to Control-Shift and Enter. Again, why are we doing that? Because the if function has an array calculation and it trumps sum product. All right, now let's look at this formula. This one we can get away. All right, now this formula right here, this is beautiful. This is great. We're using what we know, right? We already did greater than 0 and double negative to get the ones and zeros. But I've got to show you another option for this. Remember, if I copy this in edit mode, escape, and come down here and type in equal and Control V, what is this piece giving us? F9. It's giving us counts and zeros, right? So some counts. And we're interested in the numbers greater than 0. But let's remind ourselves how the if function works. The if function will interpret any non-zero number as true and any 0 number as false. So guess what? I'm actually going to put the frequency into the if logical test argument. Control Z, like this. Logical test. F9. Remember? False, true, true, false, 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 false. Now I'm simply for the comma value of true, going to put a 1. Then I don't need this value of false. I close parentheses. And when I highlight this, the if now is going to take that frequency and just put a 1 wherever it sees a non-zero number. And there we go. Now I can put that into the sum function. And this is going to require Control-Shift-Enter. We get a 2. Now, the reason I show you this is because later when we're using this technique of frequency to get a unique count, especially for our data extraction formulas in video 20, the if using the frequency function in the logical test is mandatory with these later formulas. So we're just taking our first look at it here. In this case, either one of these is fine. I even timed them, and they're virtually the same. Control-Shift-Enter. All right, there's some notes down there. Now, this is counting unique numbers given one condition. Let's scroll down here. Our next situation involves mixed data. So we have an invoice column here, and it's not just numbers. So we can't use that basic frequency setup that we've done so far. Here we have some numbers, and these are invoices, but they're text. Get this. The COUNTIF, remember sum product 1 divided by COUNTIF? It works perfect. Notice we're getting a count 3 different times for that 101. I'm going to click Escape. It works on mixed data. So this is a great, it's good to know this formula. So for mixed data, it works. Again, if you get large data sets, it's going to really slow down. All right, so we have to learn an alternative. Now let's look up here. What do we do with COUNTIF? Range, we gave it a bunch of stuff to count, and we gave it a bunch of criteria. 6 items. It gives us 6 answers. Now, we've already seen in previous videos that the COUNTIF criteria argument here, we're doing a function argument array calculation. We've seen it with COUNTIF and criteria, but we've also seen it with match function and the lookup value. So the trick is when we want to get frequency to count mixed data, we're going to have to use a few functions all mixed together. But the most inside one is going to be match. So let's look at that. All right, so lookup value. I'm going to give it all of these. Now remember, just like COUNTIF, there's 6 lookup values now. So that means match is going to deliver 6 answers. Oh, but wait a second. If COUNTIF counts, what does match do? It tells you the relative position of an item. So comma, the lookup values, I'm going to give it all these. And this is not sorted, so and we have duplicates, so I'm going to put exact match 0. OK. 6 values, 6 answers are going to pop out here. Can you guess what they are? Well, 101 is in the first position. So it's going to deliver 3 ones. 1, 1, 1. This one will get a relative position 3, and there'll be 4, 4. Let's highlight this and F9. There we go. 1, 1, 1, 3, and 4, 4. What in the world are we going to do with that, though? I mean, we're trying to get a unique count. Here's the deal. Remember, we're trying to use frequency because it's so fast. What if these were the data array? Right? That means there's a bunch of ones we need to count. All we need in the frequency function is the bins array. Well, what if we gave it all the relative positions, right? Because these are relative positions. There's only a unique data in the first, third, and fourth position. So Control Z, if we put that into frequency for data array, and for bins, we create an array of relative positions, meaning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Only the 1, the 3, and the 4 as bins, meaning upper values, will count. Think about that. 1 is going to get a count of 3 because there's 3 of them. So we know how to do this. We've done this many times already. If we want an array of relative positions, I say, hey, give me the row of all those. That's going to give me like row 114, and I don't want that. So I'm going to say, hey, subtract row. Again, that's an array calculation, a bunch of rows. We subtract 114 from all of them. That's going to give me a 0 in the starting position, so I add 1 back in. Now, if I highlight that in F9, there are our bins. Now, because the first part of the data array has 1 listed 3 times, it'll get a count right there of 3. Now I'm going to Control Z. Let's look at this. This is quite amazing. F9. Wow. So there's a 3, 1 because we had 3 ones, a 0. That was for that position right there. A 1, and In the fourth positions, how many 4s did we have? 2 of them. Control Z. Absolutely amazing. Now, F9, we should notice a pattern here. What is the pattern? How are we going to count unique items? Well, there's zeros and there's numbers that are not 0. We could use the if like we just did a moment ago. But you know what? In this case, since I don't have an if function anywhere in here that's going to make me use Control-Shift-Enter, I'm going to put this in some product. Comparative operator. Whatever is in there, are you greater than 0? Of course, that'll give us trues and falses. So I want 1s and 0s. So I'm going to put double negative, open parentheses. All right, so now I have F9. There are my 3 1s. Control Z. All right, and enter. Absolutely amazing. So we made the frequency function count mixed data. All right, and again, that is much more complicated than that. That is just flat out easy. But for large data sets, you're concerned about calculation time. That is amazing. All right, now let's take this one step further. We'll scroll down here. And our next step, we want to talk about, oh, what do you do if you have an empty cell? Because guess what? Our COUNTIF and our frequency functions, or formulas that we looked at so far, are not going to work. Now, let's look at this one, because this is a pretty convenient formula to be able to use. If I F9 this COUNTIF, it'll give us an array of counts. The 0 is associated with that empty cell. So of course, 1 divided by 0 is divided by 0. So that's why we're getting that error. So if we could deal with that, we'd be set. Now copy. Let's do this one step at a time. F9. Oh, there's a 0 there. I can do a direct. Well, right now, that criteria argument is doing a function argument array calculation, right? But let's do a second array calculation. I'm going to ampersand and join to that a null text string. What it's going to do is now it'll take that empty cell, join it with a null text string, and instead of a 0 in the second position, F9, there's a null text string. Now we won't get the divide by 0 error. Enter. Totally cool. Oh, but what happens? That formula counts the null text string as an item. And so instead of 1, 2, 3 unique items, we get 4. No problem. We can take that formula right there, take it one step further. That's a first array. Let's go to our second array. Oh, I'm just going to do an array. Hey, give me everything that's not empty. So double negative, open parentheses. Anything in there, and our not is less than or greater than. And empty, syntax is double quote, double quote. That's that null text string. All right, so now, of course, F9, that 0, Control Z, F9, that 0 will be multiplied by that 1, which represents the empty cell there. And now it won't be counted. Enter. Absolutely beautiful. Now, notice we did we used the natural tendency for the sum product to do array times array. You actually could do this a different way, too. You could take, since this is 1 divided by, and this thing right here, copy, delete, backspace, backspace, backspace. Since that Control V, now we have an array in the numerator and denominator. But notice that's just trues and falses. So the false will be a 0, and it won't give you a divide by 0 error if it's in the numerator. So that'll be fine. All the rest are true, so it'll be 1, 1, 1. Absolutely cool. That formula right there is an alternative. Enter. They calculate about the same amount of time. All right, so that's certainly a way to go. But again, the drawback is that will take a long time to calculate on large data sets. All right, so let's see what's going on with our frequency formula. Let's highlight the match and hit the F9. And we are going to get an NA error. So we need to eliminate, because the NA will mess the whole formula up. Well, check this out. Data array. F9, we'd like everything except for the NA, so I'm putting an if function, Control Z. I'm going to, instead of dumping the whole match into the data array, I'm going to use the if to get rid of that NA. So the logical test for the if is going to be, is anything in here not empty? That's our syntax for not empty, comma. So the logical test gives us trues and falses. The false will take away that NA, Control Z. The value, if true, it's just the match. We come to the end. We want to put a false instead of an NA, so I leave that off, close parentheses. Now, what did we do? Now we have an if function in an array calculation in the logical test. So we're going to have to use Control-Shift-Enter. So our rule is when we have to use Control-Shift-Enter, I don't want to use some product. I want to be unambiguous. I want everyone to know this formula requires Control-Shift-Enter. So I'm going to highlight the frequency, right, and hit F9 and see what it's delivering. Wow. 2, meaning there's two 101s, but they've collected here, not in the second position, a 1 and a 2. A 1 and a 2. So there we have it. I'm going to use this inside of an if. Any non-zero number is considered true. 0 is false. Control Z. So I'm going to use if. Hey, the logical test is that big, huge thing. Comma. Notice I came to the end. Comma. Value if true. Just the number 1. This is just as we did before, right? Close parentheses because I want the false to show up. Highlight everything. This is just the if delivering an array of falses and ones. Control Z. Now I just put it inside of sum, not some product, because now I have to Control-Shift-Enter. Why? Because that if requires it. And there we go. Much more complicated, right? However, it is much faster calculating. All right, so now we dealt with an empty cell. There's still one further complication we could have when doing unique counts. And we want to talk about this character right here. Wild cards, they're called. So this is straight from COUNTIF and Match Microsoft Help, right? Wild cards. There's a question mark, which means exactly one character, or an asterisk, which means 0 or more characters. The problem is those are wild cards. So let's look at an example here. Here's our COUNTIF. And what I told COUNTIF to do was count this. But I wanted to actually just find this one, not this one. But this is a wild card. So it means 0 or more characters. So of course it counted 2. Match. The same problem is happening. I'm using this as the lookup value. It thinks it's a wild card, so what does it give me? The 4th position instead of 4, 5, 6, 7. No problem. This is a tilde, right? And it says this right in help. If you want COUNTIF or Match to actually treat wild cards as character, you have to attach a tilde. So here's how we're going to do it. Double quote, tilde, double quote, and join it. Now, this is an array calculation. This is just joining a tilde to my criteria there. And now what does it do? It's allowed to look just for that asterisk as a character and all this. So it counts 1. The same thing holds for match, but this is the lookup value. Double quote, tilde, double quote, and join. And now, if I'm looking this up and finding the relative position, it reports 7. Let's scroll down and see how to use this tilde for a unique count. Here's our 6th example. We have some invoices. And we need to count this one and this one as 2, not 1. So we need to use that tilde to distinguish between these two items. Now, the interesting thing is this is a number. Because we put an asterisk next to this number, it becomes text. And these actually are different without the tilde. Now, let's look at the COUNTIF first. COUNTIF is easy. We just come to the range argument, and we add our tilde. Notice this is an array of values, right? So we add our tilde in double quotes and then join. The problem is when I hit Enter, we get that error because escape, we can't make array operations on the in the range argument for COUNTIF. Escape. So that is not going to work. Let's look at our frequency. Well, how many is it counting right now? There's our formula, right? That's the formula we did just a little bit ago. We're trying to avoid that empty cell. But what's the count? We really want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, it is distinguishing between these, but these two, it is not. So we need to use that tilde. Now, we're going to come to the match here. Lookup value. I'm simply going to put double quote, tilde, double quote, and join it. Now, this is not going to be a problem. We are going to have to use Ctrl, Shift, Enter. Ooh, but there's another problem here. Let's see what this right here, if I evaluate this, this is a join array calculation, F9. Notice it converts them all to text, right? So now 101 is text. So we need to do one final thing to this formula. We have to come over here to our lookup array. And since that's a number, I need to convert it to text. I'm simply going to do that little trick. Another join array operation with a null text string. Now, when I evaluate this, it's no longer a number. We can see it in double quotes. Our tilde can now work. Control Z. If we were to highlight just the match part of this and hit the F9, I get a 1, 1, 3, 5, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No problem, because that's almost what we want. We need to get rid of that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So Control Z. In the frequency, data array F9. And there we go. There are our data array values, 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8. Those are all the positions of where our unique items are. Amazing. And then the rest of the frequency, right, is simply F9. 2 of those, 1, and the rest are 1. Absolutely amazing. That'll serve as non-zero numbers for true, 0 for false. We'll get our 1s. F9, amazing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6. Control Z and Control Shift Enter. Now, this amazing formula here, this is the most robust count formula around. And I learned this from Aladdin at the Mr. Excel message board, as I have learned so many things from Aladdin. Absolutely an amazing formula. I'm going to click Escape. All right, we have even 2 more things we want to cover. What if we had the exact same situation here, but now we don't want to count all the invoices. We have a condition, right? So here's the formula we just did. Hey, that's pretty cool, right? But what do we need to do to fix this? We don't want to, in the data array, there's an if, and then we dump the match, right? So we need to add a second if before the match. So there's if, and then the match. And then everything will be dumped into the data array. So I'm going to do it down here. We'll keep that one right there. We simply come right here. Remember, we are sitting, if I can do this right, that. We need a second if. So if, and then match, dump into the array, the data array. So I'm going to come right here and add if. Anything in this second column is equal to Joe. Now, comma. The value if true is the match. So I'm coming to the end of this match right here. I don't need the value of false, so I'm going to put a close parentheses. Now, if I go right here, that data array, I've added the 2 ifs. There's 2 conditions. Remember, it's and criteria in order to get to what the match spits out, F9. You've got to be kidding me. So we can have wildcards, empty cells, mixed data, and a criteria in a column. That is simply amazing. All right, ready? Control, Shift, Enter. And then for Joe, there's 1 unique. We're skipping over the blank. 2 and 3 unique. Wow, that is just amazing. Now, 2 last things. we want to talk about a helper column to count unique items. Now, here, this is the formula we just did. We have a criteria. We went through here. It looks like we got 2. We got 3 up here because I had the asterisk there. But if I come here and change this to asterisk, I had the wrong data. So there we get 3. But, you know, so this is a single cell, and that's beautiful. And it calculates pretty quickly. I mean, there's a lot of array calculations there, but pretty quickly. But what if we could have a helper column, and we didn't want to do this huge, big monstrosity? Totally easy. And guess what? We're going to use COUNTIFs and COUNTIF. Now, there will be no array calculations in the COUNTIFs or COUNTIF, so it will work just fine. COUNTIFs. Now, I have 2 conditions. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have 2 expandable ranges. And the first range is going to be this. I'll click on that cell, colon, and then I'm going to lock the first one. Now, that's the first criteria range. The first criteria is that thing itself. That way, as we copy down, we'll get a count of 1 here, 2 here, and 2 here, right? Then we'll do COUNTIF on just the number 1, and it will be absolutely beautiful. But we have a second condition. We need a second expandable range, comma, and now our criteria is Joe, and that needs to be locked all the way down. That is a wild formula right there. Expandable ranges, 1 relative, 1 absolute, Control-Enter, double-click, and send it down. And that's just a straight, I must have done something wrong there. Oh, yes. I locked all of them. I didn't want to lock, so F4. All right, so there we go. That is an expandable range. Control-Enter, double-click, and send it down. So now we can see when we get down to here, we have an expandable range. Those ranges are expanding, 1 locked and 1 not. And now we have a 1, a 1, and a 1. And up here with helper column, we say COUNTIF the entire helper column, comma 1. Now, and you can go look in that workbook there for timing if you want. One last trick, right? What if you had, an expanding data set, and it just was going on and on and on, and you just wanted a little formula over here that told you the unique count for whatever it is. And I took numbers here just to make it straightforward. Well, we can first create a dynamic range. So back in video, what was it? I don't remember what number, 12 or 13 or something like that. I'm going to use the index. I'm going to click in the very first cell and lock it with the F4, and then type a colon. I should have locked it first and then gotten rid of that. And now I'm going to use index. Remember, index can look up a cell reference. Now, I'm going to highlight for the array all the way down to the bottom as far as I'm ever going to go. Then hit F4, comma, and then the row number. I need to look up the last number, so I'm going to use match. And I'm going to use my big number trick. So for the lookup, I'm going to use 9.99e plus 307. That's a really close approximation for the biggest number Excel can understand. Now, why the big number? Because in the lookup array, if you have a bunch of numbers, right, and in the lookup value, give it a big number, it'll always get the last one. That number is going to be bigger than anything we ever put here. By the way, you can put any big number as long as it's bigger than anything in that range. And we want approximate match, so we leave that other argument off. All right, so that'll give us an expandable range. F9 right now, it's returning just those 4. Control-Z, Control-Shift-Enter. If I add a 203, a 103, I can see this expandable range. F9 is picking it up. Control-Z, Control-Shift-Enter. I want to copy this. Control-C, Escape. Control F3, new name. I'm going to call this invoices. Down here, I'm going to delete Control V. Sometimes this gets tricky down here. I'm going to highlight all the way in. OK, so I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to check it using my little trick, right? Zoop. And there it is. It looks like it's working. The dancing ants tell me it looks like it's working. Now, I come up to some cell. I'm going to leave this there. And I'm going to say, and these are numbers, so I'm going to use my sum product, double negative, open parentheses, and then frequency. And I'm going to F3, get my invoices. Remember, data array, comma, and then invoices. I'm going to double click and get it. Close parentheses on that. I'm going to say, is anything in there greater than 0? Close parentheses, close parentheses. That doesn't require Control-Shift-Enter. So now if I enter 103, 103, 109, or whatever it is, right? Sometimes you get, as we saw earlier in the data set, accounting data that has negatives and positives. We'll list these invoices. But there we go. So there's an expandable dynamic range formula using index and define names and our unique count formula. Wow, that was a lot about unique counting. In our next video, we'll talk about the moment function. And then in the following 20, we'll talk about extracting unique lists of data with a formula. All right, see you next video.